بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أصدقائي الأعزاء، هتكلم معاكم النهاردة من واقع تقرير نشر عن موضوع رأس الحكمة، وأنا ترجمته لكم لسبب بسيط جدا. إن البعض بيتخيل إن الغرب مش فاهمين إيه اللي بيحصل عندنا. الغرب والمحللين عندهم معلومات للأسف الشديد أكتر من اللي موجودة عند الشعب المصري. لذلك هذا الفيديو هام جدا عشان تعرف هذا النظام مدى استهتاره بمقدرات الشعب ومدى بيعه لأرض شعب مصر واعتبرها جزء لا يتجزأ من خطة موضوعة، لدرجة ان التقرير شبه موضوع رأس الحكمة بالمستوطنات اللي موجودة في فلسطين المحتلة وقارنها بإسرائيل. خلي بالكم احنا في تكنوقراط مصر عنا على معظم هذه الامور، وبالتالي يتعين ان حضراتكم تساعدونا انشروا الفيديو ده على اوسع نطاق. أنا ترجمته لكم، اتفضلوا اتفرجوا معايا.
Egypt's plummeting currency is sending shockwaves around the nation. Food scarcity is rising, tourism is yet to come close to pre-COVID levels, and with their $58 billion investment in the new capital city, international investors are ready to throw in the towel. Now, at impeccable timing, the Emirates is coming to the rescue. In late February, Cairo signed a landmark deal with Abu Dhabi to construct a new city on the country's northwestern shore. Some $35 billion will be invested in Egypt, representing its single largest foreign direct investment ever. Many see the project as Egypt's very own Dubai in the making, made by the very same people who made that city flourish. Abu Dhabi Developmental Holding Company, which is the consortium responsible for the funding, says the new city will have all the hallmarks of modern urban life, including housing, hotels, schools, entertainment venues, an industrial zone, and all public services imaginable. The whole project is slated to be completed over the next 20 years. Critics, however, argue that by signing off on the deal, Egypt will trade over part of its sovereignty and turn it into an Emirati timeshare. The UAE helped al-Sisi come to power and then funneled billions of dollars into Egypt to seal that alliance. Since then, Abu Dhabi has emerged as the senior partner in its relationship with Cairo. So, Egyptians are right to be skeptical. Still, Egypt may have no choice. The country is practically bankrupt. Finding a middle ground is necessary, but the art of compromise is to divide a cake in such a way that everyone believes they have the biggest piece. Money doesn't come out of thin air, but that hasn't stopped Egyptian lawmakers from banking on a windfall. On first impressions, constructing a settlement on the arid northwestern coast of Egypt, 140 kilometers away from any major population centers and with few natural resources, makes little sense. Then again, countries don't always need physical resources to generate prosperity. Singapore, Mauritius, and Israel are examples of resource-poor regions that transformed into high-income economies. In 2014, when al-Sisi came to the presidency, Egypt seemed to be on this roadmap too. But then, the government dug itself into a debt crisis. The Egyptian pound nosedived, inflation jumped, and foreign currency reserves dried up. Al-Sisi came up with the brilliant idea to pour tens of billions of dollars into infrastructure projects that frequently went over budget. Not surprisingly, Cairo dug itself an even deeper grave. Since coming to office, al-Sisi has quadrupled Egypt's foreign debt to $164 billion. Debt servicing currently accounts for most of the government's annual expenditures. In 2024 alone, Egypt is due to pay $32.8 billion in external debt. That is an astounding amount of money going to waste. Now, creditors have had enough. Desperate for cash, Egypt has signed a deal with the UAE to develop a prime stretch of its Mediterranean coast known as Ras al-Hekma. The Emiratis will pour $35 billion in investments into the indebted Egyptian economy over the next 2 months. Technically, $11 billion will be UAE loans that will be converted into grants, which means the actual amount of Emirati investment sits at nearly $24 billion. In the long term, however, the Ras al-Hekma region could attract as much as $150 billion in investments, at least according to Egyptian lawmakers. Meanwhile, Emirati officials have promised to build a next-generation city spanning over 170 square kilometers, which is nearly a fifth of the size of Abu Dhabi city. Construction could begin as early as 2025, and the city will come complete with residential districts, tourist centers, schools, universities, and an industrial zone. It will also include a financial and a business district, as well as a seaport and an airport. That sounds good on paper, but not all Egyptians are buying it. Back in 2016, Egypt ceded 2 islands in the Red Sea to Saudi Arabia. Now, Egyptians can't help but draw comparisons. Many see the UAE encroaching on Egyptian soil and sovereignty, this time on a small peninsula by its Mediterranean coast. In response, Egyptian officials say that they've been promised 35% of the profits from the Emirati venture. Plus, Emirati investments in Ras al-Hekma could help stabilize the Egyptian exchange rate, create employment opportunities, and attract foreign currency. Egypt could also use the Ras al-Hekma mega project as a bargaining tool in negotiations with the IMF and seal a new line of additional credit. The end game for al-Sisi is that with Emirati boots on the ground, Egypt can claw its way out of the current economic crisis. So the Emirati deal is being pitched by the government as a lifeline for the Egyptian economy. By itself, Egypt offers few opportunities for monetary growth. Its capital is overcrowded, inefficient, and in decay. Tearing up pieces of Cairo to implement new infrastructure would be more expensive than simply building new cities elsewhere. Like its sister project, the new administrative capital, Ras al-Hekma aspires to develop into one of the leading financial and business hubs in the Eastern Mediterranean, which would then create a new gateway into Egypt for even more foreign investment. Still, plenty of reservations remain open. What is unclear is whether the planned seaport at Ras al-Hekma will be navigable as a deep-water port, one that can handle large, bulky cargo ships. A commercial seaport would still be useful to the Emirati Navy and complement its installations in Eritrea, but it wouldn't be deep enough for commercial or even naval vessels of a larger class. However, converting the existing shoreline into a deep-water port would be an expensive and complicated process. Ras al-Hekma has a nominal infrastructure linking with the rest of Egypt, being so far removed from nearby population centers. On the flip side, the city is close to Egypt's recently discovered offshore oil reserves, which could help sustain metropolitan development. If the Emirati objective is to turn the area into a financial hub, the likes of Dubai, developing a deep-water port is a must. From an economic lens, Abu Dhabi has been looking for additional ways to reduce its dependency on hydrocarbon revenues. Ras al-Hekma, like so many other Emirati geo-economic projects, is a means to generate income that is relatively shielded from the global hydrocarbon market. But even by Emirati standards, $35 billion is an astounding deal. Abu Dhabi is essentially offering Cairo a bailout in all but name. Even so, the Emirati deal could come with strings attached. Possibly, as some Egyptians have pointed out, Ras al-Hekma would attain a certain level of political autonomy from the rest of Egypt. Plainly speaking, Egypt's economy is notoriously difficult to reform. The military controls too much and allows too little. So, developing a new city in Egypt would require more than just fancy buildings. It would need new laws, new ideas, new populations, and new rulers. Before long, Ras al-Hekma would be declared a special economic zone and completely segregated from the rest of Egypt. For the Emiratis, it's all about grand strategy and business. In 2018, the UAE landed troops on Yemen's Socotra Island and then de facto annexed it. Yemen was infuriated, but could do nothing about it. Placing a military installation at the mouth of the Red Sea and Indian Ocean lets Abu Dhabi keep tabs on a vital choke point for maritime trade. Developing Ras al-Hekma would accomplish the same task, only this time for the Suez Canal. When completed, the UAE would hold sway over both ends of the Red Sea, giving it substantial political weight in the grand scope of things. All the same, in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Arabian periphery, coincidentally, areas that were once under Ottoman rule, 4 major political and military blocs have emerged in recent times. The first is led by the Egypt-UAE alliance, and it includes Bahrain, the Libyan National Army under Haftar, the South Yemeni Coalition Forces, and the Sudanese Rapid Support Forces. Turkey, as we speak, has close links with Azerbaijan, Northern Cyprus, Qatar, the Syrian opposition, and the internationally recognized government of Libya. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is a power in its own right and has ties with the official Yemeni government, ethnic militants in Iran and Iraq, and like the UAE, has close ties to Bahrain. The fourth bloc is Iran, and it includes its proxies in Syria, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas, Iraqi militias, and, to an extent, the Iraqi government. By developing Ras al-Hekma on the Egyptian coast, Abu Dhabi is looking to fortify its bond with Cairo, a country more than 10 times its size and the undisputed military power between the two. That said, in some respects, the UAE acts as the senior partner. It has a greater GDP despite having a population about 1/10 the size of Egypt. This economic imbalance gives Abu Dhabi categorical influence over 110 million Egyptians. Additionally, the Ras al-Hekma project has a geopolitical dimension to it. Firstly, by constructing a new city on the Mediterranean coast, the Emirates is directly competing with Saudi Arabia's Neom city by the Red Sea. Ties between Abu Dhabi and Riyadh have cooled in recent years. The two seem unable to synchronize policy when it comes to Syria and Yemen, but also over oil supplies as full members of OPEC. In terms of grand strategy, the Saudi-Emirati stalemate isn't all that surprising. For decades during the Cold War, the Arab world went through its own schism. The standoff saw Egypt and its secular socialist allies in Iraq, Syria, North Yemen, and briefly Libya pitted against the Saudis, Jordanians, Omanis, and the smaller Gulf monarchies. The UAE was somewhat fortunate not to have existed during this regional spat. Things got pretty ugly, but it ultimately ended with the decline of Egyptian power. For the Emiratis, being late to the game gave it an advantage since it had no prior commitments to either the Saudis or the Egyptians. Conversely, the speed at which Abu Dhabi and Cairo have developed their strategic posturing suggests a shared objective to flank Saudi Arabia. The second geopolitical dimension to Ras al-Hekma relates to Turkey, which is the leading economic and military power in the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as in West Asia in general. Turkey has the second largest army in NATO, and it controls the Bosphorus Strait, giving it leverage over the Black Sea, as well as the commercial activity going up and down the Danube River. Turkey also enjoys strategic ties to both Europe and its Turkic-speaking kin to the east. Nonetheless, the Emirates and Egypt look to change that equation. Where Turkey flanks the UAE in the Gulf with its alliance with Qatar, Ras al-Hekma will turn the tables and flank Turkey in the eastern Mediterranean. This is an uphill battle, however. Istanbul and the Turkish heartland centered around it is simply irreplaceable. At best, Ras al-Hekma, if successfully built into a geo-economic asset, would provide Abu Dhabi and Cairo with better seats at the Turkish banquet that is the Eastern Mediterranean. Ras al-Hekma's third geopolitical dimension is about none other than Iran. Specifically, Ras al-Hekma is in proximity to Iran's proxy assets in Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon, thus putting them under the gun. The UAE and Egypt want to counterbalance Iran's proxies since they have shifted the power dynamics in the Arab world for the worse. The Houthis control the majority of Yemen's population and now impair the maritime traffic passing through the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf, places where both the UAE and Egypt have much at stake. At the same time, Cairo and Abu Dhabi see both Hamas and Hezbollah as Islamist movements with the capabilities to overthrow nearby governments. Understandably, the Egyptian and Emirati leadership look to secure themselves from such threats, and the only way to do that is by leveling the playing field with Iran. At heart, Saudi Arabia's Neom, Egypt's new capital city, and the Ras al-Hekma project are all born from the same idea. Al-Sisi's credited-financed, overly expensive mega-projects have left the government saddled with ever-growing debt, so much so that the IMF loans are not cutting it. The UAE looks to come to Egypt's rescue and, in doing so, lift itself as the senior partner in the respective alliance. Ras al-Hekma, the new Emirati megacity, could very well benefit the macroeconomics of Egypt as high-end tourists and services flock to the region. However, Egypt's economy is too tightly controlled for any benefit to trickle down to the average citizen. Seen from this angle, the Emiratis are effectively constructing their version of Versailles designed for an increasingly out-of-touch elite. Ordinary Egyptians are unlikely to appreciate or benefit from the project, not like pouring wine for the desert.
أظن بعد ما شفت الفيديو لا يمكن الإنسان إن هو يقول إن لابد أن يرحل هذا النظام بأي طريقة كانت. لذلك نحن نؤيد وندعم أي إنسان بيقوم بأي عمل ضد هذا النظام. إحنا يعني تكنوقراط مصر. تكنوقراط مصر بتسعى بكل السبل إن هي تضع يدها في يد أي مجموعة أو أشخاص بيعملون لتخليص مصر من هذا النظام. ليه؟ لأن إحنا عندنا الأساليب والقوانين اللي بتبيح لنا ان احنا نسترد كل اموال الشعب المصري المنهوبة، وعدم دفع القروض اللي اخذها السيسي واللي تهرب معظمها بره زي ما قلنا لكم في آلاف الشركات او مئات الشركات اللي موجودة بره واللي هي اصلا قائمة على تهريب الاموال. ان شاء الله القاكم في لقاء اخر. شكرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.